A locked box, a forgotten key. My grandmother's will wasn't just about dividing assets, it was about exposing a secret life. My husband thought her death was a terrible tragedy. He just didn't realize it was his official eviction notice. That will unlock a forbidden property, and with it, his entire second family. My name is Alara Vance. I am 35 years old, and my life is spent cataloging the past. At the New England Antiquities Institute, I am a curator of historical documents. I handle brittle paper, translate faded ink, and bring context to forgotten lives. I am trained to spot inconsistencies, forgeries, and narratives that do not align with the physical evidence. My job is to find the truth buried under the official story. Nothing, however, prepared me for the dust in my own grandmother's home. Genevieve's house in Boston was a fortress of memory, smelling of old wood, tea, and the sharp scent of camphor. Now, it just smelled of dust and finality. I was surrounded by the artifacts of her long life, sorting the donation pile from the keep pile in the heavy silence of the sitting room. The grief was a physical weight, a thick wool coat I couldn't take off. My phone buzzed on the mahogany side table. It was Marcus, my husband. Again. Just checking in, honey. His voice was a perfect performance of concern, deep, resonant, and practiced. How are you holding up? Are you taking breaks? I'm fine, Marcus. It's just a lot of boxes. I know, Ilara. I wish I could be there right now. This damn conference call just won't end. So many people are sending their condolences. I'm trying to field them all for you. You just focus on you. He was always the devoted husband, the one who handled the ugly logistics of life so I could remain in my academic, sepia-toned world. He managed the finances, the social calendar, the sympathy calls. For 6 years, he had been my anchor. Today, his efficiency felt less like a comfort and more like a barrier. I have to go, I said, looking at a stack of her old ledgers. I'll call you later. I hung up before he could reply, needing the silence. I moved to her writing desk, a heavy Victorian piece where she'd balanced her checkbook for 40 years. Tucked inside the center drawer, beneath a stack of stationery, was an envelope. It wasn't sealed. It just had my name on it, written in Genevieve's familiar spidery script. I pulled out the single sheet of paper. My dearest Ilara, if you are reading this, then the old clock has finally wound down. Do not let them rush you in your grief. But more importantly, do not let your grief blind you. There is a safe deposit box at the First Beacon Hill Trust, number 417. The key is taped beneath this desk. No one else knows of it. Not your mother, and certainly not your husband. Go alone. Open it yourself. A piece of advice. My girl, from one historian to another, trust your curator's instinct over your wife's heart. One examines the evidence. The other is too willing to forgive the forgery. The words sent a chill so profound it cut right through the heavy air of the room. Trust your curator's instinct over your wife's heart. What a strange, unsettling thing to say. My fingers fumbled beneath the heavy desk, brushing against old gum and dust until they hit the cold metal of a key, held by brittle yellow tape. Just as I pocketed it, the front door opened. Marcus. Figured I'd surprise you, he said, shrugging off his tailored coat. He looked immaculate, as always, his suit perfect, his expression saturated with sympathy. You weren't answering your phone. I got worried. The conference call ended. I asked, my hand closing around the key in my pocket. I pushed it off. You're more important. He came over, rubbing my shoulders. His hands felt proprietary, heavy. What's that? He nodded toward the letter in my other hand. Just a note from Grandma. Old memories. I folded it quickly, my heart thumping in a new, strange rhythm. You know, Ilara, he said, his voice sinking into that gentle, persuasive tone he always used when he wanted to manage things. You don't have to carry all this, the legal stuff, the estate. Let me handle it. You're grieving. You shouldn't be dealing with banks and lawyers. I looked at him. My husband. Reliable. Handsome. Successful Marcus. For the very first time, when I looked at his supportive smile, my curator's instinct whispered that something was wrong. The patina was too perfect. No, I said, surprised at the firmness in my own voice. I need to do this. It's the last thing I can do for her. He looked disappointed, just for a flicker of a second, before the concerned mask snapped back into place. Of course, honey. Whatever you need. I went to the First Beacon Hill Trust the next morning. The vault was cold, smelling of steel and old money. The attendant left me in the small, curtained privacy booth with the long, metal box. Number 417. My hands trembled slightly as I lifted the lid. I was expecting bonds, or perhaps jewelry, maybe stacks of cash. The box was nearly empty. There was no money to speak of, just a few old $100 bills that looked decades old. There was no jewelry, save for a simple locket. There was only a heavy, old-fashioned key ring with 3 brass keys on it and a single, folded legal document. I unfolded the paper. It was a deed. It granted Genevieve Vance ownership of a property, which she had then transferred into a trust listing me as the sole beneficiary. But it wasn't a property I recognized. It was a small house, a cottage, in a town I had never, ever heard of. Silver Creek, Massachusetts. The deed was dated 5 years ago. At the bottom of the deed, a line item was circled in red ink. Property to be known as the forbidden property. A cold administrative term. Perhaps, or another one of my grandmother's warnings. My fingers brushed the bottom of the metal box. There was something else, tucked into the velvet lining. It was a photograph. A cheap, slightly blurry picture, like something printed from a convenience store kiosk. It showed a man standing on the porch of a small, white house that I did not recognize. The man was younger, wearing a baseball cap and smiling, holding a beer. It was, without any doubt, Marcus. My breath hitched. I flipped the photo over. On the back, in my grandmother's unmistakable handwriting, was one sentence. The devil in his Sunday best. I put the key ring and the deed in my bag, but I left the photograph in the box, pushed back into the velvet lining. I couldn't stand to have it in my house. I walked back into my home, a place that suddenly felt like a stage set. Marcus was in the kitchen, reading a financial report on his tablet, a glass of wine already poured for me on the counter. "How did it go, honey?" he asked, his eyes not lifting from the screen. Was Grams secretly a millionaire? Hardly, I said, my voice sounding impressively steady, though my pulse was hammering. It was just some sentimental junk, her mother's locket, some old war bonds that expired decades ago. Nothing of any real value. I watched him. He finally looked up, his face arranged in that familiar mask of sympathy, but his eyes, they flickered, just for a second. I saw it. It wasn't relief. It wasn't comfort. It was profound, unmistakable disappointment. "Oh," he said, the word flat. "Well, at least that's settled. One less thing for you to worry about." He turned back to his tablet. Closure is a good thing. I went to work the next morning before dawn. The New England Antiquities Institute was my sanctuary, a place of order and fact. My office, surrounded by 18th century maps and brittle correspondence, was the one place I felt in control. I locked the door. I started not as a wife, but as a curator. The first search term, Silver Creek, Massachusetts. The name meant nothing to me, but my professional databases immediately found it. It wasn't a Boston suburb. It was a tiny, unincorporated community deep in the rural hills of western Massachusetts. The population was barely 900 people. It wasn't a commuter town. It wasn't a vacation spot. It was isolated, a place you went to disappear. My fingers flew to the state property database. I typed in the address from the deed. It was real. A single-family cottage, 1.5 acres, purchased exactly 5 years ago. My grandmother, Genevieve Vance, was the name on the original deed, but the transfer on death beneficiary was me, 5 years ago. We had been married for 1 year. I opened a new window, our joint finances. Marcus was meticulous, managing all our investments, our mortgages, our bills. He always said I shouldn't worry my academic head with it. I pulled up the statements. Going back 60 months, I searched for the purchase amount. I searched for mortgage payments. I searched for any large, unexplained withdrawals. Nothing. Our accounts showed expensive dinners in Beacon Hill, a trip to Aruba, the down payment on Marcus's Audi. But there was no money, not a single dollar. That corresponded to the purchase of a house in Silver Creek. So, how were the property taxes being paid? I sat back, the acidic taste of coffee bitter in my mouth. Trust your curator's instinct. I was looking at the wrong ledger. I left our personal finances and dove into the deep archival systems the Institute subscribed to. These were tools for tracing genealogies and historical land ownership, tools that dug into municipal records, tax assessments, and utility payments. I found the parcel in Silver Creek. The taxes were current, paid on time, every quarter, for 5 years. But the payments weren't coming from Genevieve Vance. They weren't coming from me. They were being paid electronically by a registered LLC I had never heard of. T Enterprises. The room tilted, my vision blurred, focusing only on those 2 letters, M.T. Marcus Thorne. My breath caught in my throat. He hadn't just visited this house. He hadn't just been photographed there. He was funding it. He had set up a shell company to pay for a secret house that my grandmother somehow discovered and, in a final brilliant act of vengeance, had bought out from under him, or perhaps trapped him with. Why would he need a secret house in the middle of nowhere? My hands were shaking, but my mind was cold and clear. The curator was in charge now. I left the archival databases and went to the public internet. I typed Silver Creek and Marcus Thorne. Nothing. No social media check-ins. No public mentions. I broadened the search. Silver Creek Community Blog. A small, poorly designed website popped up. The Silver Creek Sentinel. It was exactly what you'd expect bake sales. Town meeting minutes, high school football scores. I began to scroll back. Weeks, months, 1 year, 2 years. I stopped. 3 years ago. A post titled Fall Harvest Fair, a smashing success. There was a photo gallery, pictures of pie-eating contests and hay rides, and then, the 7th picture. My stomach dropped through the floor. It was Marcus. He was wearing jeans and a flannel shirt, not the bespoke suits he wore in Boston. He was laughing, his head tilted back. He was holding a child, a little boy, perched on his shoulders, holding a half-eaten candied apple. The boy had Marcus's dark hair, his exact smile. I read the caption beneath the photo. Local resident Marcus and his young son soak up the autumn sun. I almost threw up in the antique waste bin beside my desk. My hands flew to my mouth, but not before a small, strangled sound escaped into the silence of my office. Son. Local resident Marcus and his young son. The words echoed, a flat, objective statement of fact that detonated my entire reality. The man I had breakfast with just this morning, the man I was currently mourning my grandmother with, had a son. I pushed back from my desk, my chair scraping harshly on the old wooden floor. I felt the blood drain from my face. I gripped the edge of the desk to keep from falling. For a full minute, I just breathed, staring at the glowing screen, the happy, laughing faces of my husband and a child who was not mine. Then, the curator took over again. The shock receded, replaced by a cold, methodical fury. This was no longer an anomaly. This was a parallel text, and I needed to find the rest of it. I went back to the Silver Creek blog. I scanned the comments on the Fall Festival post. Generic praise. Great job, everyone. So much fun, but one name. Isabel Reed had liked the post. She had also liked the post about the town bake sale and the one about the library's new roof. A local. I moved from the blog to Facebook. I typed Isabel Reed and Silver Creek. One profile appeared. It was private. Of course it was. A life this secret would be locked down. I couldn't see her friends, her posts, her information, but I didn't need to. The cover photo was public. It was a professional photograph, the kind you pay for. It was set in a field of wildflowers, the light, golden and warm, and in the center of the frame stood Marcus, his arm wrapped tightly around a smiling, dark-haired woman, Isabel. She was lovely. And standing in front of them, his hand held by Marcus, his other by Isabel, was the little boy from the blog. He looked to be about 4, maybe 5 years old. He had Marcus's eyes, Marcus's chin. He was a perfect miniature version of my husband. They were a family, a perfect, happy, complete family. And behind them, unmistakable, was the house, the white cottage from the photograph in my grandmother's safe deposit box, the forbidden property. My mind began to race, connecting the data points. The house was purchased 5 years ago. The boy was about 5 years old. This wasn't a fling. This wasn't an affair. This was a marriage, a life, a second, complete, parallel existence. I clicked on her profile picture, which was also public. It was just her and the boy, the two of them building a snowman. The caption read, "My whole world." I scrolled, my hand moving like an automaton, searching for any other public fragments. I found one, a post from 2 years ago, a birthday. It was a picture of a blue frosted cake, clearly homemade, with 3 candles. Friends had commented, "Happy birthday to the little man. 3 years old already. Time flies. You're such a good mom, Isabel." And then one, from an account that looked like an older relative. "Happy birthday to our sweet Theodore. Wish we could be there." I froze. Theodore. The air left my lungs in a painful rush. Theodore. It wasn't just a name. It was the name. It was my grandfather's name. The man my grandmother, Genevieve, had adored, had mourned for 30 years. The man whose legacy formed the core of our family history. Marcus knew this. He had stood with me at the cemetery, his hand on my back as I placed flowers on Theodore Vance's grave. The sheer, calculated cruelty of it was breathtaking. He hadn't just stolen my money and my future. He had stolen my past. He had taken the most sacred name in my family and given it to his illegitimate son, the product of his secret life. I scrolled back through my own memory, my own text, every emergency work trip, every last-minute conference, every server meltdown that forced him to be away for days at a time. I matched the dates. The urgent audit in Chicago 2 Decembers ago. His timeline matched a public photo Isabel had posted of her and Theodore at a Silver Creek tree lighting ceremony. The investor crisis in New York last March. It was the same weekend as the Happy Birthday Theodore cake. He wasn't just lying. He was living. He had built a home, raised a son, celebrated holidays, and created a world, all funded by the life he was living with me. I wasn't his wife. I was his bank. I sat there in my office, the silence of the Institute absolute. The sun had long since set, and the only light came from the screen, from the glowing, smiling faces of my husband's other family. The shock was gone. The grief was gone. There was only a cold, hard, structural integrity. My grandmother's words came back to me, sharp as broken glass. Trust your curator's instinct over your wife's heart. The wife was dead. The curator was all that was left. I sat in my car in the Institute's dark parking garage for a long time, the screenshot of Marcus and his son burning a hole in my phone's memory. My grandmother knew. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. The letter, the key, the forbidden property. It wasn't an inheritance. It was a weapon, It was the first breadcrumb in a trail she had laid for me, knowing I, her protege, her fellow historian, would have the skills to follow it. She hadn't left me an asset. She had left me an investigation. She had left me a target. The grief for her loss was still there, but it was now eclipsed by a cold, clarifying rage. The wife in me was numb, but the curator was awake. My first call was not to my husband. It was to Chloe. Chloe and I had been roommates in college, a lifetime ago. We'd bonded over art history and cheap wine. I'd gone into the quiet, dusty world of curation. Chloe had taken her brilliant analytical mind and aimed it at the modern world. She was a private investigator in Washington, D.C., and she was terrifyingly good at her job. I drove out of the garage, my hands steady on the wheel, and parked on a side street in Beacon Hill. I dialed her secure line. She picked up on the second ring. "Alara, it's after 10. What's wrong?" "I need to hire you," I said. My voice was flat, devoid of any of the hysteria I felt swirling inside me. "I need a pee. Alara, what's going on? Is it Marcus? Is he hurt?" "He's the subject," I said. There was a silence on the line. "Okay," she said, her tone shifting instantly from friend to professional. "Talk to me. Give me the provenance." I did. I laid it all out with the clinical precision of a curator describing an artifact. The death of Genevieve, the safe deposit box, the letter, the warning, the deed. The unknown town of Silver Creek, the shell company, T Enterprises, paying the taxes, the blog post, the photo, the woman, Isabel Reed, the boy, Theodore. I spoke for 10 minutes without interruption. When I finished, Chloe let out a long, low whistle. "Jesus, Ilara, you've done a month's worth of work in an afternoon. Okay, listen to me. The most important thing you can do right now is nothing. Nothing, Chloe. He has a child." "No," she said, her voice sharp. "You don't know the full story. You have the what, but you don't have the how. You especially don't have the how much. You go home. You are the grieving granddaughter. You are heartbroken about Genevieve. You are sad. You are distracted. You are a mess. That's your cover. He expects you to be weak right now. You use that. Do you understand me? Ilara, you do not confront him. You do not ask one question. You are a ghost." "I understand," I said. "Be a ghost." "Good. Send me everything. The LLC name, the links, the deed, all of it. I'm starting on MT Enterprises right now. Go home." I hung up, but I didn't go home. My next call was to Mr. Aris, my grandmother's estate attorney. He was a man in his 70s who wore three-piece suits and still used a fountain pen. He had known Genevieve for 50 years. "Mr. Aris, this is Alara Vance. I apologize for the late hour." "Alara, my condolences. A terrible loss. Your grandmother was a remarkable woman." "Yes, she was," I said. "She left me a letter. It led me to a safe deposit box. Number 417. The line was quiet. I heard the faint scratch of his pen on paper. "Ah," he said. "Number 417. I was wondering if you would find it. She was most specific in her instructions. You knew what was in it." "I knew of it. Ilara, your grandmother was a very private, very intelligent woman. She merely informed me that the box contained sensitive personal documents and that if you called me regarding its contents, I was to offer you my full support. So, tell me, what did you find?" I told him about the deed, the LLC, and the property taxes being paid by Marcus. I left out the son. That was personal. This was financial. Mr. Aris didn't seem surprised. "I see. M.T. Enterprises. How transparent of him. Alara, your grandmother was many things, but naive was not one of them. She has laid the groundwork. I suggest you keep going. In the meantime, will be reviewing the specifics of her will. She was very particular. Please, continue." I hung up. The board was set. Before I went home, I stopped at a 24-hour pharmacy. I paid cash for a prepaid burner phone and a bottle of water. I sat in the parking lot and created a new, encrypted email account, a digital war room. I spent an hour uploading the photo from the blog, the screenshots of Isabel's profile, and a scan of the deed I'd made at my office. The burner phone buzzed in my hand just as I was finishing. A new text. From Chloe. It wasn't a text. It was a call. I answered. "You're not at home, are you?" she asked. No greeting. "No, I'm in my car." "Good. Stay there." Her voice was tight. All business. I ran MT Enterprises. The LLC is registered to a P.O. box in Silver Creek, but that's just a dead end. The real story is the bank account linked to it. She said, "It's not just paying out for property taxes. Alara, it's receiving funds. Very large, very regular monthly payments." A cold dread settled over me. "From where his personal accounts?" "No," Chloe said. "That's the part you're not going to like. The deposits are wire transfers. They're coming from your office, the New England Antiquities Institute." My phone felt slick and cold in my hand. "The Institute, Chloe. That's impossible. The finances are audited. I would know." "Would you?" Her voice was devoid of sympathy. "He's your husband, Alara. He has your passwords. He knows your schedule. He knows who signs what. How many times has he come to take you to lunch or surprise you at the office? He's had access to your world for 6 years. My world. He had invaded my sanctuary. The one place that was mine. The one place of order and fact. He had contaminated it. The theft of my heart was one thing. This was a violation of my soul. How? My voice was a whisper. "How much?" "I'm just starting the trace," Chloe said. "But the payment descriptors are all related to your department. Archival restoration services, rare manuscript acquisitions, 18th century document preservation." He created dummy vendors, Alara. He made up companies, billed the Institute for work that was never done, and approved the payments himself, likely by spoofing credentials. I felt sick. My credentials? "Almost certainly," Chloe said. "He wouldn't need anyone else. He just needed to get your digital signature on an invoice. The transfers are consistent. They started small, about 3 years ago. Then they escalated. I'm looking at an initial estimate ballpark of over $800,000. The phone almost slipped from my grasp. $800,000. The money I had personally fundraised for. The acquisition fund I had spent nights and weekends writing grants for. The money meant to preserve the very history I had dedicated my life to. He hadn't just stolen from the Institute. He had stolen directly from me, from my work, my effort, my passion. My God, I breathed, the fog of shock finally clearing, replaced by a terrifying, sharp-edged clarity. My career. "Yes," Chloe said, her voice grim. "That's the real problem. Right now, this doesn't just look like he's a thief. This looks like you're his accomplice. These are your departments. These are your funds. If this whole thing blows up and you don't have every single piece of evidence lined up, you will be the one who takes the fall. They'll say you were in on it together. The grieving widow who just discovered her husband's fraud. It's too convenient. You'll lose your job. You'll lose your reputation. You could lose your freedom." He had done this to me. He had methodically, brilliantly, and cruelly woven me into his crime. He had made me the patsy. My love for him, my trust in him, was the weapon he used to destroy my own life, all to fund his other one. I drove back to my house, the house that was no longer a home, and walked inside. Marcus was asleep, or pretending to be. I went to the shared home office, the one he so generously set up for me. I logged into the NEAI's financial portal. I was a curator, not an accountant, but I knew what to look for. I followed the trail Chloe had pointed out. Archival restoration services. A vendor I'd never heard of. But there it was. A payment authorization for $40,000. A second for $55,000. Another. I clicked open the authorization form. To approve a payment this large, it required a digital signature from the department head. My name was at the bottom, Ilara Vance. It was my signature, my exact, verified, digital signature. I had not signed this. I had never seen this document. I clicked on another, and another. My name, my approval. Over and over. How had he done it? I sat back, my mind racing through the last few years. He was always helpful. Let me clear your inbox, honey. You look tired. Just give me your laptop. I'll update the software. Then I remembered. Last winter, it was about a year ago, I had a terrible case of the flu, the kind that knocks you flat for a week. I was propped up in bed, barely able to see straight, surrounded by tissues and half-empty glasses of water. Marcus had been so attentive. He brought me soup. He managed my calls. And then, one afternoon, he'd come in with his briefcase, looking apologetic. Ilara, honey, I am so sorry to bother you with this, he'd said, his voice full of concern. It's just some insurance papers. The bank is being a nightmare about refinancing the mortgage, and they need your signature on these releases. It's just boilerplate. I'd do it, but they need both of us. He'd put a stack of about 20 papers in front of me, with little sign here stickers all over them. I hadn't read a word. I just wanted to go back to sleep. I'd scribbled my name, my signature weak and shaky, on every dotted line. You're a lifesaver, he'd said, kissing my damp forehead. Now, go back to sleep. I'll handle the rest. I stared at my signature on the screen. It wasn't a digital forgery. It was a scan. He had taken my real physical signature from those insurance papers and turned it into a digital asset, a stamp he could use to approve the theft of my entire life, one invoice at a time. I walked through the front door of my home, the lock clicking shut behind me with a sound of finality. It was a stage, and I was the lead actress, returning for the second act. I had sent Marcus a single text an hour earlier. On my way home, I feel awful. It was the bait. He was in the living room, as I knew he would be. The lights were dimmed. A single glass of whiskey sat on the coaster beside him. He looked up, his face a perfect sculpture of husbandly concern. Ilara. Oh, honey, you look shattered. He stood and crossed the room, pulling me into his arms. I let him hold me as his suit, smelling of expensive wool and a faint, subtle cologne, enveloped me. His arms, the ones I had once believed were my sanctuary, now felt like a cage, and I let myself cry. The tears were real. They were hot and bitter, and they poured out of me. I cried for my grandmother, a brilliant, sharp woman who had died. I cried for myself, the wife who had died in a dusty museum office staring at a picture of a little boy. I cried for the violation of my life's work, for the $800,000, for the sheer, suffocating audacity of his betrayal. He held me, his hand stroking my hair. Shh, I know, he murmured, his voice a deep, comforting vibration against my ear. I know. It's so hard. It's a terrible loss. I've got you. He was comforting the wrong grief. He was consoling a woman who didn't exist anymore. I just let him, my body sagging against his, playing the part of the broken, grieving wife Chloe had assigned me. He guided me to the sofa, his hand pressed firmly to the small of my back. Here, sit down. Let me get you something. No, just sit with me, I whispered, the words catching in my throat. He sat beside me, keeping his arm draped around my shoulder. A calculated gesture of possession. For a full minute, we sat in the heavy silence, broken only by my ragged, practiced sniffles. Then, he began, the probe, gentle, almost an afterthought. So, he started, his voice a soft murmur. Did you get everything sorted out today, at the bank, with the With the will and everything. He rubbed my arm, a slow, soothing circle. You're sure you're okay? Alara, you seem so overwhelmed. You know, I can look over the paperwork for you, if you want, just to make sure the lawyers aren't taking advantage of you in this state. You shouldn't have to handle this all by yourself. There it was, the offer to help, the same help that had given him my signature, the same help that had built a life in Silver Creek. I pulled away, just enough to look at him, and made sure my eyes were watery and unfocused. It's fine. It's nothing. It's simple. Nothing. What do you mean? It's just the house, I said, my voice thin and reedy. Her house here in Boston. It just all goes to me. And the contents. It's just so much paperwork. Marcus, I sighed, a long, shuddering breath of exhaustion. I'm just too tired. I can't even think about it right now. I watched him. I watched his face as he processed this. He was trying to keep the mask of sympathy, but I saw it. The same flicker of profound disappointment I had seen in the kitchen. He had been hoping for a windfall. He had been hoping for cash, for stocks, for something liquid he could get his hands on. Oh, he said. Right. Of course. Just the house. Well, that's straightforward. At least. He was calculating. I could practically see the gears turning behind his concerned brown eyes. He was recalibrating his plan. His hand on my knee felt like a spider. Every concerned tilt of his head, every gentle squeeze of his hand, was a lie. This was our new marriage. A cold war fought with gentle gestures and sympathetic tones, waged in the dimmed light of our living room. He stood up. I'm going to make you some tea, he said, his voice firm with manufactured care. Chamomile. You need to sleep. He went to the kitchen. I heard the click of the kettle, the clink of a mug against the stone countertop. He was my husband, performing a simple act of kindness. A sudden, cold spike of paranoia shot through me. What if there was something in it? Sleeping pills. Something to keep me foggy, compliant, and malleable. My God, this is what he had reduced me to. I was a curator of historical artifacts, a woman of logic and fact, and I was now wondering if my husband was trying to drug me. He returned, handing me the steaming mug. Drink this, honey. It will help. I looked at the pale, swirling liquid. I knew, rationally. It was just tea. He was a thief, not a poisoner. But the trust was so fundamentally broken that the fear was real. It was a new, permanent part of our life. I took a tiny, scalding sip, just enough to satisfy him, and set the mug on the coffee table. He sat beside me again, putting his arm around my shoulders. He seemed to be thinking, staring at the empty fireplace. You know, he said, his voice thoughtful, persuasive. I was just thinking about your grandmother's house. What about it? I asked, my voice muffled as I leaned against him, playing my part. Well, once the probate is all cleared, and you've had time to, sort through her things, maybe we should sell it. My blood ran cold. I kept my breathing even. Sell it. Think about it, he said, his tone brightening, as if he'd had a brilliant, spontaneous idea. It's a big old house. It's going to be a money pit, the upkeep, the taxes, and frankly, aren't there just a lot of painful memories there for you now? He squeezed my shoulder. We could take the money from the sale. 100% profit. We could go on a trip. A real one. Just the two of us. He turned to look at me, his eyes full of fake sincerity. We could go to Greece, like you've always wanted. Or Italy. Just get away from all this. A fresh start. God knows you deserve one after everything you've been through. I stared into the tea. He wasn't trying to comfort me. He was trying to liquidate the assets. He smelled money, my inheritance, the value of the Boston real estate, and he was already planning how to spend it, how to move it. He was trying to erase Genevieve's legacy, the very place she had hidden her final clues, and use the profits to fund his escape. his fresh start, with his other family. Maybe, I whispered, laying my head against his chest. Maybe that's a good idea. He kissed the top of my head, a proprietary, triumphant gesture. That's my girl, he said. Just rest. I'll take care of everything. I closed my eyes, the performance of the grieving wife complete. He thought he was in control. He had no idea the war had just begun. I told Marcus I needed a day. I'm going to Graham's house, I said, my voice carefully modulated to sound weary, the way he expected. I just need to be alone there. Go through her clothes, her papers, without without anyone else. He was perfectly, poisonously supportive. Of course, honey. Take all the time you need. Don't push yourself. Call me if you need anything. Anything at all. He kissed my forehead, a gesture that felt like a brand. I got in my car. I didn't drive to Beacon Hill. I drove west, toward the setting sun, for almost 2 hours. The highways and suburbs of Boston bled away, replaced by the dense, dark woods and rolling hills of western Massachusetts. Silver Creek wasn't a town. It was a cluster of houses at the end of a winding road. The address on the deed led me down a long gravel driveway, shielded from the road by a thick stand of pine trees. The white cottage sat in the clearing, just like the photograph. It was immaculate. There were flower boxes under the windows, filled with dead-looking autumn mums. A small blue tricycle was parked by the front steps. I parked my own car around a bend in the drive. Out of sight. I walked to the front door, my hand closing around the heavy brass keys from my grandmother's safe. I felt no fear. I felt no hesitation. I was a curator entering a vault, here to assess the artifact. The first key I tried slid into the lock. It turned smoothly, without a single catch. The door swung open onto a home. I stepped inside. The air was warm, and it smelled of coffee and cinnamon, and faintly of baby powder. This was not a secret apartment, not a place for sordid, hurried encounters. This was a life. I was standing in a living room. It was furnished in a style I didn't recognize: soft, worn armchairs, a colorful, cluttered bookshelf. A child's wooden toy chest was pushed against one wall. And the photographs. They were everywhere. Our home in Boston was sleek, modern, and minimalist. It was a showroom. This place was a shrine. On the mantelpiece, there was a framed photo of Marcus, Isabel, and the boy, Theodore. They were on a beach, laughing. Marcus was holding his son on his shoulders. On the wall, there was a series of framed prints, the kind you get from a professional photo shoot. Marcus and Isabel, her head on his shoulder. Marcus and Theodore, building a snowman. I walked, as if in a trance, through the small house. I saw the kitchen, with a high chair in the corner and a set of magnetic letters on the refrigerator. I saw a child's bedroom, painted bright yellow, with a small bed covered in dinosaur sheets. This was not a second life. This felt like the only life, the real one. I was the ghost, I was the satellite, and this house was the sun. I was standing in the center of the living room, staring at a photo of Marcus in a flannel shirt, holding his son at the fall festival, when I heard it, the sound of tires crunching on the gravel driveway. My heart didn't race. It just stopped. I stood perfectly still. I didn't hide. I waited. I heard a car door slam. I heard a high, giggling voice. A child. "Mommy, look, a frog. A big one." "That's great, sweetheart," a woman's voice replied, warm and tired. "Now come on, let's get these groceries inside. I don't know why Mark isn't home yet. He said he'd be here." The front door opened. Isabel Reed, the woman from Facebook, walked in, her arms full of brown paper bags. The little boy, Theodore, ran in past her, holding a muddy stick. Isabel stopped. She saw me. The grocery bags dropped from her arms. Apples, a carton of milk, and a box of macaroni and cheese spilled onto the floor. Her hand flew to her mouth, her eyes wide with pure animal terror. Who, who are you? She screamed, grabbing her son and pulling him behind her, her body forming a shield. Who are you? How did you get in my house? I held up my hand, the one still holding the brass keys. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't move. I just stated the fact. My name is Alara Vance. I let the name hang in the air, in the warm, cinnamon-scented room. I am Marcus's wife. Isabel stared at me. The terror on her face didn't change to guilt. It warped into a profound, chilling confusion. What? She whispered, shaking her head. No, that's not funny. Who sent you? What is this? I am Alara Vance, I repeated, my voice as cold and clear as the glass in the picture frames. I have been married to Marcus Thorne for 6 years. I live in Boston. Isabel took a staggering step back, her hand fumbling for the wall to keep her balanced. She looked like she was going to be sick. No, she said, the word cracking. No, you're lying. His wife is dead. I froze. What did you say? His wife, she cried, her voice rising into a hysterical sob. His wife. Alara, that's your name. Alara Vance, she died. 3 years ago. A car accident. That's how we met. We met at a support group, a grief group in Worcester. He's a widower. He told me his wife was dead. The spilled groceries lay between us like debris from an explosion. Theodore's muffled cartoon sounds were the only noise in the room, a surreal backdrop to the smoking crater of our lives. Isabel was still pressed against the wall, her face a waxy, bloodless mask. Dead, she whispered again. He told me you died. He showed me an obituary, a printed one. A forgery, I said, my voice as cold and hard as the key in my pocket. Like everything else, I am a curator. I specialize in authenticating documents. Believe me, I know a fake when I hear about one. I pointed to the armchair. Sit down, Isabel. He has been playing us. The question is, what are we going to do about it? She moved, an automaton sinking into the chair. The boy, Theodore, was safe in the other room. He was the only innocent. I sat on the sofa, the one where he had clearly sat, night after night, holding her, lying to her. He called himself Mark, she began, her voice a hollow whisper. I met him at a grief support group. It was in Worcester, about 5 years ago. So did I said. She flinched, looking at me. What? Not a grief group, I clarified. I met him 5, almost 6, years ago. Go on. My sister had just passed away. I was a mess. Broke, waitressing, living in a terrible apartment. He was there, mourning his wife. Alara. She said my name like a curse. He said you were killed by a drunk driver. He was so broken, so lost. He's a very good actor, I said. He saved me, she continued, the tears rolling down her cheeks now. He said he couldn't save his first wife, but he could save me. He found this house. He said it was a foreclosure, that he got it for a steal. He said he wanted to build a real life here, away from the ghosts in Boston. He gave me this. She gestured around the room, at the home, at the life. He gave me Theodore. He was always on business in Boston, she said, her voice thick with the dawning, terrible realization. His demanding job. He'd be gone for 3 or 4 days, then come back here. He said he hated the city, that it held too many bad memories. He said he was only doing it for us. The demanding job in Boston was me, I stated. His first and only legal wife. His other, entirely separate life. I let the silence settle before I delivered the rest. The money, Isabel. The money he used to save you. The money that bought this house. That pays for those groceries. That funds his Mark persona. It's not his. Her head snapped up. What, he's in finance. He's an investor. No, he's unemployed. And he has been for at least 3 years, I said. I am the head curator at the New England Antiquities Institute. He's been using my credentials, forging my signature, and faking invoices to my department. He has embezzled over $800,000 from my acquisition fund. He's a thief. Isabel. He's been funding this life by destroying mine. Her face crumpled. It wasn't just heartbreak. It was the terror of a person realizing their entire foundation was quicksand. "Oh my God," she breathed, looking toward the hallway where her son was. "Oh my God, Theodore." "Yes," I said, my voice sharp, driving the point home. "Theodore, what happens when the money runs out? What happens when the dead wife, report the fraud. He's trapped you. Isabel, you are an accomplice, and you didn't even know it." Her terror solidified into a new, cold fear. "It's not just the money. It's Theodore." "What about him?" "He's been strange for the last month," she said, her voice dropping, her eyes darting around the room as if he might be listening. "He's been pressuring me to sign papers, legal papers." My blood ran cold. "He said it was just estate planning. That's what he called it." She was trembling. "He said that, as I wasn't his legal wife, we had to protect Theodore's assets. He wanted me to sign something giving him full, sole guardianship and financial control over Theodore if anything ever happened to me." "He's not trying to protect his son," I said, the final, ugly piece clicking into place. "He's trying to control the money. He's setting Theodore up as his trust. He's planning to hide the stolen funds in his son's name." I stood up. I walked over to her. I was no longer the other woman. I was no longer the grieving wife. I was the curator, and this was an acquisition. "Isabel." I waited until her tear-filled eyes met mine. "He has built his entire kingdom by isolating us. You are the hidden country wife, and I am the dead urban wife. He needs us to be victims. He needs us to be ghosts." What are you going to do?" she whispered. "I am going to take him down, for my career, for my grandmother, and for my grandfather's name, which he dared to give to his son. But to do it, I need access, and you are on the inside." I held out my hand. "Help me, Isabel. Don't do it for me. I am the woman he was cheating on you with, for all you knew. Do it for your son. Do it so Theodore isn't the son of a con man and the heir to a stolen fortune. Help me expose him." She stared at my hand, and then at my face. She saw no weakness there. She saw no tears. She saw herself, reflected in a different kind of prison. She didn't take my hand. She stood up. "Yes," she said. Her voice was flat, dead. "Yes, I will." "What do you have?" I asked. He keeps a laptop, not his Boston one. He calls it his work laptop, his real one. My heart hammered against my ribs. "Where is it?" "In the garage, hidden inside an old locked toolbox. He said it's the only safe place. It has all his enterprises. All the books for enterprises. He told me it was his retirement plan. All of it. Offshore accounts. Everything." She took a shaky breath. "He's coming this weekend. Saturday. He called an hour ago. Said he had to finalize some accounts before his big trip. He said it was the last one." "The trip he was planning to take with me," I said, "using the money from my grandmother's house. He wasn't just managing his assets. He was planning his exit." "He'll be here Saturday morning," she whispered. "Good," I said, pulling the burner phone from my pocket. "Then we have less than 48 hours to burn his kingdom to the ground." We had less than 48 hours. The clock was a ticking bomb. I drove back to Boston that night, my mind a cold, clean space, all the grief and shock burned away, leaving only the scaffolding of the plan. I called Chloe from the burner phone as soon as I was on the highway. "Isabel is in," I said. "She's cooperative. She has a laptop, a private one. It's in the garage. She says it has everything. M.T. Enterprises, the offshore accounts, all of it." "Good." Chloe's voice was sharp, all business. This is what we do. I'm sending one of my associates to her house. Right now. They're a digital forensics expert. They will clone that drive, and they will get Isabel and the boy out of that house and move them to a secure location. By morning, that house will be empty, and we will have the entire case. What about me? You go home, Chloe commanded. You play the grieving wife. You are exhausted. You are sad. You are processing. You are exactly what he expects you to be. I did as I was told. The next morning, as I was sipping coffee, I could not taste. Chloe called. We have it, she said. It's not a laptop. Ilara, it's a confession. It's a goldmine. She was right. It was worse, and better, than I could have imagined. Marcus had detailed everything. The offshore accounts, the transfer schedules, his meticulous plan to drain the last of the Institute's acquisition fund another $200,000 before disappearing, and the emails. He wasn't acting alone, I said, my voice hollow as I reviewed the file on my own secure laptop. No, Chloe replied. He had help. Someone on the inside. Looks like a man named David Harrison, your CFO. The emails show a clear conspiracy. David would approve the fraudulent invoices. Marcus would provide the shell corporations, and they would split the take. 60-40. David, a man who had sent a $300 floral arrangement to my grandmother's funeral. He was in on it. I forwarded the entire damning package to Mr. Eris. The next move was not mine. It was the old guard. Mr. Eris did not call the police. He called the chairman of the NEAI board. He presented the evidence quietly, discreetly, over an old-fashioned lunch at the Union Club. The board was, predictably, apoplectic. They were furious, not just at the theft, but at the public scandal it represented. Their pristine, centuries-old institute, defrauded by the philandering husband of one of their own curators. It was an embarrassment. It was a crisis. They wanted blood, but they wanted it quietly. They agreed instantly to my and Mr. Eris's proposed course of action. The stage was set. An emergency mandatory meeting of the board was called. The Institute's largest, wealthiest donors were also invited, told only that a significant new philanthropic direction was to be announced in honor of the late Genevieve Vance. My part was to deliver the guest of honor. I went home to Marcus. I found him in the living room, scrolling through his phone. Marcus, I said, my voice trembling. I didn't have to fake the exhaustion. Ilara, he said, looking up, his face softening into that familiar, false concern. You should be resting. It's Mr. Eris, I said, holding a piece of paper. He called. The final reading of the will. It's Monday. At the Institute. At the Institute. His eyes sharpened. He smelled money. Yes, it's complicated. I let a tear roll down my cheek. It seems Graham's set up a new endowment, a very, very large one. The board, they want to be there, to honor her. All the major donors are coming. It's a whole thing. I paused, then delivered the bait. Mr. Eris says that I need a financial representative. As the beneficiary. He says it's mandatory. And Marcus. I looked at him, my eyes wide and pleading. I can't stand up in front of all those people. I can't talk about money. Not now. Not without... I broke off in a sob. He was across the room in a second, his arms around me. He was victorious. Shh, shh. Of course you can't, he murmured, his voice smooth as silk. Don't you worry about a thing. It's my job. I'm your husband. I'll represent you. I'll handle all the financial talk. You just sit there and be strong. He was practically glowing. He, Marcus Thorne, would be in a room with the wealthiest patrons in Boston, representing a massive new endowment. He probably saw his whole future laid out. The morning of the meeting, I received a text on my burner phone from Chloe. The packages are secure. Isabel and Theodore were on a plane, heading to a new life in a new state, their identities scrubbed, funded by a small portion of the MT Enterprises money that Chloe had managed to liberate. Marcus, meanwhile, was preening. He emerged from our bedroom in his finest suit, a charcoal gray, $3,000 masterpiece, the devil in his Sunday best. "How do I look?" he asked. "Like you own the world," I whispered. "I'll take care of everything, Ilara," he said, kissing my forehead. "I promise." The grand boardroom of the NEAI was a chamber of old money and older power. The mahogany table, which stretched almost 20 feet, was full. The chairman of the board sat at the head. The Institute's wealthiest, most powerful donors, men and women who controlled half of Boston, flanked the sides. David Harrison, our CFO, sat near the end, looking unusually pale. And then there was us. I sat in my black funeral dress, a grieving widow. Beside me sat Marcus, his hand resting supportively on the small of my back, his face a perfect sculpture of concerned strength. He was wearing his finest charcoal suit. He was ready to perform his duty as the concerned husband, the financial steward of my new, massive inheritance. Mr. Eris stood at the lectern at the front of the room. He cleared his throat, and the quiet chatter died instantly. "We are here," he began, his voice a gravelly rumble that commanded attention, "to execute the final wishes of Genevieve Vance. She was a woman of singular intellect, fierce loyalty, and remarkable foresight." He glanced at me, his eyes sharp. "Her will is, in most respects, simple. Her entire estate, including the Beacon Hill property and all liquid assets, is to be consolidated into a single trust, to be managed for the benefit of her sole heir, her granddaughter, Ilara Vance." I felt Marcus's hand on my back squeeze gently, a gesture of, "We did it." I saw him give a subtle, humble nod to the chairman. He was already playing the part of the endowment manager. "However," Mr. Eris continued, his voice cutting through Marcus's silent victory, "this trust is not unconditional. Genevieve was most specific. She included a codicil, a morality clause." A nervous cough came from someone near the window. Marcus's hand on my back went still. Mr. Eris put on his reading glasses. "I quote, 'This trust, and all assets therein, shall be considered immediately null and void, and all funds shall revert, in their entirety, to the New England Antiquities Institute's Acquisition Fund." He paused, letting the words hang in the air. "Should the direct heir, Ilara Vance, or her spouse, Marcus Thorne, be found to have engaged in actions of financial deceit or gross moral turpitude." The silence in the room was a living, breathing thing. Marcus's hand, which had been a comfort, felt like a block of ice. I could feel the muscles in his jaw clenching. His confident smile didn't fade. It froze, a horrifying, brittle mask. "What?" Marcus whispered, his voice dangerously low. "Is that supposed to mean—" I stood up. My voice was not the voice of the grieving wife. It was the curator. It was cold, clear, and objective, the voice I used when presenting a finding. "Mr. Eris," I said, addressing the lectern, "I believe I have evidence pertaining to the violation of that clause." "Ilara!" Marcus hissed, his hand grabbing my arm. "Sit down. What are you doing? You're distraught." I yanked my arm free from his grasp. I looked at the chairman, at the donors. "If you would all please direct your attention to the main viewing screen." I clicked the remote in my hand. The massive, high-definition screen at the end of the room, usually reserved for displaying 14th century maps, flickered to life. It displayed a bank ledger. "I present to you M.T. Enterprises," I said, my voice resonating in the quiet room. "A shell corporation registered in Silver Creek, Massachusetts. A corporation that has been receiving very large, very regular payments from this institute for 3 years." Click. The screen changed. "These are the invoices. Archival restoration services. Rare manuscript acquisition. All phantoms. None of this work was ever performed. Click. These are the emails. A conspiracy between Marcus Thorne and our own CFO, David Harrison, outlining the payment schedules and the 60-40 split. David Harrison made a small, strangled sound. Click. And this is my signature. Forged. Scanned from insurance documents I was given while I was ill, and used to authorize the theft of $837,000 from the fund my grandmother's will now seeks to replenish. I stopped. I let the evidence hang in the air. This is insane! Marcus was on his feet, his chair scraping violently. His face was a mask of crimson rage. She's sick. She's grieving. This is a complete fabrication. Ilara, sit down. You don't know what you're saying. I have never, I said, turning to look him in the eye, been more certain of what I am saying in my entire life. This is slander, David Harrison shrieked from the end of the table. You have no... That, I said, cutting him off, was the financial deceit. But my grandmother's clause also mentioned gross moral turpitude. I have one final exhibit. I clicked the remote. The spreadsheets vanished. The screen was filled with the face of Isabel Reed. She was sitting in a plain room, her face pale, but her voice steady. My name is Isabel Reed, she said. For the past 5 years, I have been living with a man who calls himself Mark. He told me his wife, Ilara Vance, died 3 years ago in a car accident. He met me at a grief support group. He told me I was his second chance at a family. He told me I was the only one. The video played. The room was utterly silent, save for Isabel's quiet, devastating testimony. Marcus did not move. He just watched, his face ashen, as his entire secret world was laid bare. Then he lunged. He didn't lunge at the screen. He lunged at me. You bitch, he roared, his hands clawed, his face a rictus of hate. You ruined it. He never reached me. 2 of the donors in the front row, 2 men I had never seen before, were out of their seats in a microsecond. They were not old men in suits. They were fast. They caught Marcus in mid-air, one intercepting his chest, the other twisting his arm behind his back with a force that brought a scream of pain from Marcus. The chairman of the board stood slowly, his face like granite. David Harrison, you are suspended, effective immediately. Do not leave this room. You will wait for the police. He then looked at Marcus, who was now pinned against the mahogany table by the 2 men from the Economic Crimes Unit. Marcus Thorne, the chairman announced, his voice booming. You are under arrest for grand larceny, conspiracy, and fraud. The sharp, metallic click of the handcuffs echoed in the boardroom. Marcus stopped fighting. He was breathing in ragged, painful gasps, his beautiful $3,000 suit twisted and ruined. He turned his head, his eyes, full of a hatred so pure it was thermal, locking on me. I walked over to him, standing just out of his reach. I looked down at the man who had destroyed my life, and I gave him a small, cold smile. I leaned in, my voice a whisper that only he could hear. My grandmother says hello. Thank you for listening to my story. I'd love to know where you are all listening from, so please comment below and let's connect. Don't forget to subscribe to Lily Revenge Stories and like this video. And if you enjoyed this, please support us by hitting that hype button, so this story can be heard by even more people.